consent to serve as a research subject. Some speaker was talking about the importance and sanctity and pertinence and the legal mandatoriness of taking consent. Indian Evidence Act very clearly defines the different shades of consent, and Indian Contract Act even goes beyond that. It says that, I'm saying a live example when I was at AIMS. If a doctor is in his consulting chamber and is grossly lost in examining the patient or taking history or whatever, it's a crowded OPD and a patient walks in. He greets the doctor. Doctor, without having looked at the patient who greeted him or her, nods, not even vocalizes, just nods to the greeting in affirmation. That very moment, and that nod has been cited by the patient who greeted him or her. That very moment, implied consent is created or established. And thereafter, while the same doctor, with all good intentions, was saving life of another patient, the patient who greeted him collapses in the OPD chamber. The NOK can sue the doctor in the court of law for alleged act of medical negligence. Do you understand the implication of nuances, the various states of obtaining consent? Are we being trained enough to obtain consent in letter and spirit? No, we are not. I witnessed the cases here as well, and I have witnessed many cases at AIMS when I was part of this committee which used to take care of cases referred from the National Consumer Dispute Resolution Forum. Others are much more difficult, especially those for which no consensus. I mean, if you look at the cases which come across to you or before you daily, in whatever capacity you are working in this healthcare spectrum of healthcare delivery, you will see that there are situations which are dealt with law, like MTP Act she was talking about, or PCP NDT Act, or FOA Act, or FOTA rules, whatever. Then there are cases for which broadly we have got ethical guidelines unto us, available unto us to refer to and to act in conformance with those guidelines. Still, there is a grey zone, there is a null zone, wherein we don't have either ethical guidelines to fall back on, or we have got statute to look at too. And in that bracket, again there are two subsets, as I have observed myself, that quite a good number of cases you can still arrive at a consensus when you discuss with your peers or with the ethics committee or you brainstorm. And there is another subset that's still left open to interpretation by everyone in his or her own way. So while dealing with such cases, the Bare Act provisions are there to guide you obviously very explicitly. But having understood the ethos of the behind promulgation of that code by MCI, you have to understand those ethos and you have to invoke those ethos within yourself to arrive at a decision in those challenging moments where we don't have either law or ethics to guide us. We all know the Hippocratic Oath, we all know. Then we also Declaration of Geneva, thereafter there came Interest Code of Medical Ethics, that also we are known from our first year medical schools. These four pillars is being talked about by all of you and you all know. But again, I would reiterate at the cost of repeating the same thing, that all of us know these four words: beneficence, non-maleficence, autonomy and justice. How good we are interpreting it in a contextual framework with right earnest and with true perspicacity. How often do we do that? That is the question. And that is what you are supposed to ponder over. I already have discussed this medical law and the ethics. Law, I believe you must know, you all know, and law is a legal fallacy called statute. medical ethics is closely related to law, but law and ethics are not identical. They are absolutely mutually exclusive. One is codified, one is non-codified. Many times ethics provides a higher standard of behavior than laws. And these are intangibles that you are to trade off while coming to a decision in situations which are challenging and where you don't have precedence. In addition, laws vary from country to country, but ethics applies regardless of national boundaries because it emanates from your being only, your full existence, the way you have been brought up. And these are intangibles which by and large remain similar all over the globe. For a moment I'll jump to meta-ethics. There's a term called meta-ethics. Meta-ethics provides the basis behind the ethical principles, like deontology. The one theory of deontology. What should you do? What is your duty? You will do, notwithstanding the consequences. Whereas the other theory is theory of consequentialism. We take a decision based on the fact, or our understanding, or our belief, or our value, or our morality, or maybe ethical guideline, keeping in mind the fact that what is going to be the consequence of that state act of formation or commission. So meta-ethics is there to draw a broad framework or scaffold or pigeonholes sort of thing, algorithm, which helps you frame, understand, interpret and apply in real time situations as and when situations come to you. And there are many meta-ethical theories or meta-ethical theoretical ways to say, which helps you arrive at a decision in times of need, notwithstanding the fact whether you have got any written guideline or not. In order to respond to the expectations of patients, health professionals should know and practice the core values I have described of medicine and specially care for or about a patient's ability and autonomy in their work. These values, together with respect for basic human rights, are the basis of medical ethics, which have been given a word to, if speaking legally, which have been given a word to when it was codified by MCI in 2002, which is by and large understandable by all of us, far less practiced and far less contended, because despite best of codification, ethics will always have some element of intangibility. It is often difficult to measure something that is intangible and invisible to the human eye, and especially then to control it. I hope I am trying to make sense, because I thought the topic given was the code of medical ethics 2002. But simply reading out the code won't have served purpose for an audience who is already senior enough and can read that themselves very well. So I am trying to rebrush or refresh your orientation, your way of looking at it, your frame of reference or your perspective on the same topic. Sometimes, especially in today's global business environment, it's difficult to implement the concept of ethics, which in itself does include the idea of universality and equality in the applicability of the rules for what is good for one may be bad for others. Quite often we come across situations when I was being trained at Delhi or even here, when you have got one specific resource, say for example one ventilator, vent bed, and we have got more than one seekers who are in need of it. Recently we have submitted the UP state policy for live organ donation, UP state policy for deceased organ donation, and UP state policy for organ sharing. How do you share organs when you have got a list of recipients available, waitlisted, and you have got few organs to share with? So how, these are ethical questions, and there are ethical considerations which go into play when you are taking a decision. I did the same thing in Delhi for the NCRism when I was working in the Thermic Sciences Center RP course. So we decided how to have a ethically correct, ethically sound cornea sharing system for the NCRism. What I mean to say, just having gone through the provisions carved in black and white on piece of paper won't serve the purpose for an audience like you people. You are supposed to go through them. You are supposed to reflect within yourself. You are supposed to connect it with real-time situations. The level of care you are working in, primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary. The set of resources that you are being provided with. What I can do here at PGI, that may not be possible at Basti. Because the set of constraints are different. The set of resources are different. And they both converge on the same point when you are aiming at an end objective, which has to be achieved. Health policy imposes an additional role on healthcare workers too, to conduct social policy and even to the keepers of the social wealth. If you look at the ethical code 2002, you will see how does it begin. Even the first chapter, declaration, and thereon entire section expects from you something which is not expected out of any profession, any dimension, all over the globe. That is the benchmark they have set for ourselves, or we have set unto ourselves. That's why we are into profession, not an occupation. Again, these two are different. As one speaker was telling that professional misconduct and professional negligence, we call it law defines it in a different way. Negligence, act of omission or commission. How do we define? Due diligence, due care, breach in either of these, some damage, and damage is the direct consequence of breach, then an alleged medical negligence is said to have happened. Be bullet list. So, health policy, the guideline that we are referring to, my topic itself, again adds burden to us, our already burdened conscience and the cortex, both. Besides adherence to these core values, medical ethics differs from the general ethics principles to everyone by being publicly professed in an oath such as the World Medical Association Declaration of Geneva and our code. Why? What I mean to say that the Code of Medical Ethics 2002 is in public domain, is known to all. The public is now much aware. We are living in an era of info age where everything is available at their fingertip. So there's tremendous pressure on medical fraternity to conform or to adhere to these code while practicing or by delivering healthcare at the respective locales in whatever capacity they are in whichever specialty they are in. Oaths and codes vary from one country to another and even within countries, but they have many common features, including promises that physicians will. If you look at the ultra filter rate of this code of medical ethics, only this much will come out of it. There are many common features, including promises that physicians will consider the interests of their patients above their own, will not discriminate against patients on the basis of race, religion, or human rights grounds, and will protect the confidentiality of patient information and provide emergency care to anyone in need. These are the core belief system, core values, the individual morality or even ethical guideline, obviously, because it is codified now. The main concern of medicinal demand is that doctor's commitment is to keep patients' interest over everything else. It's always you before I. That's the way it has been said in the books. The vital issues of self-sufficiency, privacy, justice, usefulness, etc. are key variables that ought to manage the everyday basic leadership by doctors. मैं फिर दोहराना चाहूँगा कि Code of Medical Ethics 2002 by MC or NMC is not to be read, is to be interpreted, is to be understood with right frame of reference and to be invoked at point in time in times of need. The moral values of medical practice have been prescribed by the Indian Medical Council Professional Conduct, Etiquette and Ethics Regulation 2002, which reinforces the moral guidelines in India. There is something which has been as old as we all are, not individually, collectively, because it dates back to the human civilization itself. When from agrarian society, when we were cave dwellers, then we became agrarian society. The Riverine civilization, concept of property came, and then the concept of governance came, and then concept of protector came, and then came the concept of justice. So it is as old as the civilization itself. Maybe codified in 2002, a little earlier by Geneva, or maybe 100 years. but something that we have been maybe unconsciously or subconsciously, we have been practicing it. Even an illiterate understands what is right or wrong from his own way of looking at the things. We only have collectively codified for the sake of clarity and adjudication, because whenever there is a breach of ethics, if someone resorts to court of justice, then there is something to be referred to arrive at a decision. That's the only intention behind codifying ethics. Otherwise, ethics by definition is not be codified. The moment you codify it, becomes law. And if you look at the history of legal system in India, you will see that the codified ethics over the course of time gradually filtered into or came into act. They switched side, it became act per se. That's the way it happens. So for example, the very pertinent example in question is CPA, Consumer Protection Act 1986. In 1985, WHO even convened a meeting to ensure the rights of consumer as a consumer, and Government of India, being signatory to the Covenant on Consumer Protection Right, had to promulgate a law. So subsequently, in 1986, CPA was promulgated. But the way word consumer has been defined in CPA 1986 was never interpreted in a way that rendering of medical service can also be brought or considered or be equalized as like any other service. Till the point in time in 1994, when a very famous case, V.P. Shanta case, when Supreme Court expanded the interpretation of the word consumer and service in a way that the medical profession was also considered to be equal to the service, because it was being granted for a consideration to a seeker who is a consumer, and that very one stroke of pen changed the fate of medical fraternity in the country, and the entire medical profession was brought under the ambit of CPA 1986. A very good example as to how and what led to this. Again, the moral turpitude, somehow we all are ourselves to blame too. Advent of, if I look at the way it developed in our country, advent of Pratap Reddy, Chennai, Apollo system, gradually corporate culture, consumerism, and many things grew. Defensive practice, it all came, and it was taken cognizance of by people. Collective public sentiment reflected in Supreme Court judgment, and doctors too were brought opportunity as God earlier brought as a simple mere service provider for payment of a consideration. That's very sad to have happened. It happened. I want, and at time won't permit either. I want to discuss the code per se. I thought that when topic was given to me by Professor Mukesh, I thought I will not read like a newsreader a bare act provisions. I thought to steer your conscience, steer your thought process, to help you give a fresh perspective as to time is right now to introspect, to reflect within, and to see that our own conscience grows to that extent, deepens to that extent that it should not evolve further. The more law evolves or expands, the more litigation, less the morality. If you plot a graph, you will see the inverse relationship. Individual morality going down, laws coming up, litigations coming up. So if we individuals, as a human being, we individuals, as a member of medical fraternity, are conscientious enough and draw upon basic principles of morality, then I don't think that we would need further revision of these codes or subsequent transgression of codes into statutes and further augmentation of litigations and sort of, de-escalation of the repute that this profession used to get in the eyes of, in the heart of common men should not be allowed to go down further. Thank you very much.